Welcome back to Fossil Ridge Games. Today we're talking about a strategy and how to play guide for the new Root Marauder expansion, specifically the faction known as the Lord of the Hundreds. As a general overview, the Lord of the Hundreds represents a marauding barbarian horde of rats, and aptly so, they are rats. They swarm across the map and cause absolute devastation. In order to play this faction effectively, you have to be prepared for combat, and more combat. You will be fighting the entire game. This faction scores points by eliminating all pieces in a clearing and being the only faction in that clearing with pieces or markers. Secondarily, the Lord of the Hundreds excels at stealing and taking items from other players. If you can master both of these aspects, you can definitely dominate the game of Root with the Lord of the Hundreds. Let's go ahead and introduce the pieces for the Lord of the Hundreds. The first one is the rat carrying the banner. That is going to be your Warlord. So many of the cards in the game are going to trigger actually off this Warlord. So as an example, you're going to have what's called mood cards. And I'll just go ahead and flash those in front of the screen really quick. These mood cards are going to key off of your Warlord and your Warlord's location. So that's a pretty important aspect of the game. Now, your Warlord will not be able to be removed permanently from the game. So if you lose your Warlord and it dies in battle, it is basically just a warrior. Another warrior will rise to take its place. So you slaughter one of these warlords and another one will just simply appear. Next, we have the warrior tokens themselves, and these are the rats. There are 20 of these for the Lord of the Hundreds, which is very comparable to some of your other warrior factions that we've seen previously in Root, such as the moles or the cats. Next, we have what's called a stronghold token. This is a building which is responsible for troop generation. You're literally going to be fighting the entire game. Just over and over again, you're going to be losing and suffering casualties and losses in your army, and you need a way to recover it. The stronghold is where some of these units are actually generated. Your other units will be directly generated to your Warlord. Finally, we have the mob token, and the mob token is used to destroy other enemy tokens, and that can be buildings or circular tokens from other factions. And this die is associated with the mob token, in which you randomize the direction in which the mob travels, and it's going to be moving around the board in different directions based upon your die roll. Now we're going to talk about some of the special abilities that are at the top of the Lord of the Hundreds player board. First up, we have the Warlord, which is the token that's in the center of the screen. And it says your Warlord is a warrior that cannot be removed outside of battle, moved outside of your turn, or placed except with Anoint. So what's kind of interesting about this, it functions as a warrior. So you can use it to fight in combat. If you only have your Warlord left, you can still inflict one wound upon the enemy. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that it cannot be moved outside of your turn. So if we're talking about the Vagabond, and if for some reason the Vagabond would ally with this faction, it would not be able to move your Warlord. And then it says it cannot be placed except with an Anoint action. If your Warlord is slaughtered and killed, what the rat faction will do is promote another rat warrior somewhere on the board, and it will become the new Warlord. As one Warlord falls, another one will rise to take its place. Something else that you have to understand about the Lord of the Hundreds is that you won't be able to score a ton of points based upon crafting. This is a faction that really despises crafting. So the second ability at the top of the screen is called Contempt for Trade. And it says when you craft an item, gain it, but score no listed points, or remove it to score them. Next up, we're going to talk about the final special ability for the rats, and this is going to be called Looters. This is a way that the Lord of the Hundreds rat army can steal crafted items from other opponents. So as an example, we have 4 of these rat warriors, and let's say they attack in a clearing with 2 of the Marquise warriors, and the Marquise player has a crafted bag item on their board. Now in this case, what you do is you roll both of the attack dice, And in this case, the Lord of the Hundreds scores a 2 and the Defender scores a 1. But since you're doing a looter action, this die is removed and the Lord of the Hundreds inflicts 0 casualties. Then you go to the Defender, and then the Defender can inflict 1 casualty on the Lord of the Hundreds. After this battle, if the Lord of the Hundreds controls the clearing, then they are able to take 1 item from the defending player, and then they can add it to what's known as their Horde. And I'll kind of go through next what that means. So this specialized action, and this is what I recommend, don't pick on spots where you have 4 defending armies, and it's going to be unlikely for you to control that clearing afterwards. Look for clearings in which your opponent literally only has 1 troop, and they're basically defenseless. It makes your loot actions much easier to achieve. Now that we know how to forcibly take items from other players, we're going to talk about what that actually means. So on the right-hand side of the player board is a section that is called the Horde, and this represents all of the items that have been stolen or looted from ruins across the map that this rat tribe has amassed. So as an example, we had the bag item that was taken from the Marquise character, and when that occurs, you simply put it on the track. Now, if you notice, there are icons listed in each of the boxes, and it tells you where the looted item goes. So we have 2 different types of tracks. We have the command track, and then we also have the prowess track. So these are going to be different types of bonuses that it gives your army. As an example, maybe on a later turn, the crossbow is looted, and then that will go on the prowess line. Now what you're going to notice at the bottom, there are numbers 2, 2, 3, and 4. So the more items you amass increases your command point total. Your command is going to start at 1 point, and your prowess also starts at 1 point. So by amassing these items, it increases these 2 different abilities. So let's understand the Horde mechanism a little bit deeper, because I mentioned before that you can actually score points by getting rid of items from your Horde track. So you always want to start from left to the right and you build across. So as an example, we have our bag on the top row, which is going to give us a 2 command. But on the bottom row, we've gotten lucky and we have amassed a nice set of sort of relics and items that we've taken from other players. And at this point, our prowess is now at 4. So what's interesting is that if I'm going to try to put an item on a full track. So let's say I have an additional sword. Well, there's no room to put it on this track, and the sword is going to go on this track because we can see the icon located in the box. So if I ever get an extra item that I can't fit onto this track, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that item or an item on this track, and I can score 1 victory point. So once you start having just this massive horde of items, you can actually start scoring points, but this is going to be something that is going to occur at the very end of the game. So now we have an understanding of how we can score victory points with the Horde, but that's not really why you want all of these items. We have the 2 different abilities known as command and prowess, and I'll kind of walk you through what that means. So first we're going to talk about prowess, and this is located on the 2nd row. And I'm going to talk about this first because it appears first in Birdsong as part of your normal phase. So during the recruitment phase, when you're trying to amass troops, you are going to recruit warriors equal to the prowess in your warlord's clearing, then 1 warrior at each stronghold. So if your prowess is 1, you can build 1 warrior to your warlord's clearing, and it gets added directly to his army. That's very important. So why would you want to add more tokens to this? So let's say I go to add additional items, and as I start adding additional items, now I'm at a 3 prowess. That means that every round during my recruitment phase, my warlord, who is at a clearing, now gets 3 soldiers to that location. That is a huge advantage because the warriors are placed directly with the warlord. and that allows you to create and stage massive attacks against the other players, and it's very hard for them to respond against you because when they build their warriors, they're often not in the exact location that they need them. The Lord of the Hundreds gives the Warlord the ability to amass troops very quickly in his warband. And then at the top, we have what's called the command track. So during your daylight phase, you have the ability to take several actions based upon how many different command points that you have. So as an example, you can move, battle, or build based upon the number of command points that you have. So as this increases from 2 to 3 to 4, it allows you to move and attack with your Warlord, which is pretty fantastic. Now, what's interesting about this is that the command of the hundreds is that you can move and battle and build. It doesn't necessarily have to be with your Warlord, but as I'll show you later with mood cards, sometimes your Warlord will have special abilities for each time it attacks. So oftentimes when I was playing this faction, I used the command points specifically in relation to a mood card to create really devastating attacks, and I'll kind of show you how that works. Next, I'm going to teach you about mood itself. So as part of your bird song, it's going to be the end of your bird song, you're going to change to a different mood. So you can't be the same mood 2 turns in a row. So as an example, if I'm stubborn and I get to my phase where I have to change my mood, I have to change to a different one of these cards, and there's a whole bunch of these. Now, where this gets a little bit tricky and a little bit complicated is that at the top of each of these cards in the upper left-hand corner, there is an item icon that is present. If you have that item in your Horde, so as an example, if in my Horde I have a crossbow, I can no longer be stubborn. So typically what I do when I'm playing this faction, I just take these and I flip them over to the side, and that's just for my mental sanity to understand that I can't use the stubborn card as long as I still have a crossbow in my Horde. And then I can only change to the other types, and notice that there is one called Lavish. Lavish does not have any sort of icon in the upper left-hand corner, so you can change your mood to that. So as an example, let's say on the previous turn I was wrathful. When I hit my different mood as part of my bird song, I have to just take this card, and typically what I do is I move it over to the side. And these cards, so the one that's face down is going to be my crossbow card, and then Wrathful is the one that I played. So that's just a good mental way for me to then only look at the cards that are present in this box right here, and then I'll go ahead and pick a new one. And when I'm done with the turn, the Wrathful card I can play then next turn, but Rowdy I can't play 2 turns in a row, so it's going to go off to the side. So if you just kind of organize your play area, the mechanic is a lot easier to use. So as another example, let's say I then get a sword out later. I'm going to look through my deck, I'm going to take Wrathful out, and then I'm going to put it face down in my pile over here. And that's just so I don't get confused and use something that I'm not allowed to use. There's a couple mood cards that I want to mention in conjunction with this game. So the first one's going to be Wrathful, and it says, as an attacker in battle with the Warlord, you deal an extra hit. And what's kind of great about this is that you can destroy locations and enemy factions that are almost even bigger than you, and you can inflict a ton of damage. So as an example, we have this Marquise controlled location in which they have 4 warriors, and then the Lord of the Hundreds brings 4 warriors as well. So when you're the attacker and you can deal an extra hit, that can be pretty awesome. So in this case, it's going to be a 2 to a 1. But imagine if you were to roll a 3. So in this case, the Lord of the Hundreds can inflict 4 casualties on the cats, which is pretty amazing.
because I actually do have enough warriors to do that, so you could wipe out their entire faction. So that one is very impactful. And then another one, which is really impactful, is the Stubborn card. And Stubborn says, in a battle with your Warlord, you ignore the first hit that you take. So, you know, as an example, maybe we're fighting the Marquise character again. In this case, the Lord of the Hundred scores 3 hits, and the defending player, which is the Cats, would score 2. But since I have out this Stubborn card, it would only inflict 1 point of damage, and then 3 of the Cats would come off. That's a great way to sustain an attack. And what's great about it is that it's any battle with your Warlord. So as your prowess increases, which is down here, so in this case we have a 2 prowess because we have 2 items on the board, I could then make a second attack, and since I'm fighting with my Warlord, the same mood card would apply, so it also reduced the damage on the second attack as well. Same thing with Wrathful, you know, so if I'm an attacker with the Warlord, every single attack that I make can be done with an extra hit. This is a great way to cause devastating damage to your opponent. So be kind of careful too that, you know, if you do have a sword out, this Wrathful card will be kind of removed from your options. So be really mindful of the items that you have in your Horde. And it might be that, you know, you do like playing some of these cards, like with the crossbow or the sword icon on them. You might kind of avoid putting these into your Horde if you like playing those cards. The strategy for the Lord of the Hundreds is to take over the map as quickly as possible, and you want to target half the map. And in order to do that, you need a lot of troops, and you need to then focus on building what's called strongholds. So in this case, I'm just putting 2 of them out on the map. But notice that there are locations on any route map with 2 or 3 building positions. This one actually has 3, but one of them is currently blocked with a ruin. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out real quick too. And the other thing that you want to do is try to look for a location that is more centrally located. And the reasoning behind that is that once your troops are generated, it's less distance between you and your enemies. So you want to have that constant oppressive presence in which you're constantly attacking and destroying your enemies. If you can get them out of alignment early in the game, which is pretty easy with this faction, they can't recover from that, and you can just bully them the entire time. So look for a clearing location early on in the game to take. So as an example, we have some limited actions that we can perform with the Lord of the Hundreds because our prowess and our command values are only going to start at 1. So when I command the hundreds, that's going to key off of my command point total. So I will only have a 1 in command at the start of the game, so that allows me to move my Horde of Rats into the location. But then I have the advance the Warlord step, in which that is going to key off of my prowess. And my prowess is also going to be 1 at the start of the game. So that's going to allow me to either move or attack with that point. So I kind of spent my command phase moving. Now I'm going to spend my advance the Warlord phase attacking. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead, you know, perform an attack and wipe out this cat troop at this location. Now, next turn, I'm going to put down strongholds. The other thing is, too, on my first turn, now this is an uncontested location. There's no enemy pieces here, so I'm going to score 1 victory point. So that's a great way to open up the game. Now, next turn, I'm going to spend 1 of my command points to put down a stronghold, and that's going to then accelerate my troop production at that location. So I can then put 1 of them on the Lord of the Hundreds, and then the stronghold is going to generate another troop. I'm going to walk you through what the mob token does. Mob tokens are put into the game sort of late in the phase. It's going to occur during the evening phase in what's called Incite. And you can place a token down. You can place one of these mob tokens down by spending a card of the corresponding clearing color. So in this case, it would be red. And you have to have at least 1 hundreds warrior in that location, and it can be your Warlord. So either one works just fine. Once this token is out on the map, it's going to start raising and destroying other tokens and buildings present at that location. So at the beginning of your next birdsong phase, each mob in an area will start destroying and removing tokens. So what's kind of interesting about this is that I have a conspiracy token, I also have a Woodland Alliance token, and then I also have one of the lizard gardens out on the map. Also, too, I have present in this clearing is a ruins location. So when this occurs, the mob will destroy all of these tokens. So every single one of these tokens will come off, and it will also remove the ruin, revealing the crafted item that is underneath, and then that ends up in your horde. So by using the mob tokens, you can especially keep the Woodland Alliance and the Corvid Conspiracy in check. If they start spreading their tokens amongst the map, they can't really do a sneak attack on any of your locations where you have a mob token, because it's kind of pointless to put their tokens down if the mob token's going to then immediately destroy their tokens on the next turn, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of a defensive sort of thing, and it keeps especially the Woodland Alliance from building up tokens in your locations. What's really critical about the Lord of the Hundreds is that you have to control area, you have to control woodland clearing spaces in order for you to score points, so your mobs will help you kind of get rid of that. Now, the second part of the mob token is that they kind of spread across the board however they see fit, which can be kind of an issue. So as an example, we have this clearing right here, and let's say the mob, destroys all the tokens in this location. Then what you do is you roll a die, and rolling the die shows you where the next mob is going to be placed on the board. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out, and then the mob is now going to travel sort of in a southerly direction to this next location, and you don't have a choice on that. So it's just going to randomly move to a new location of the color that you actually rolled. Now, this can be kind of a pain and a little bit of a headache, because now you have a token out in a location where there are none of your soldiers. This is an easy way for the enemy to score victory points. You just basically put an undefended token down in their location. But when you do that, remember that you can then attack that next location. So if a mob moves into an area and you don't control it, that's a great opportunity to move your horde of rats down and take over that location, because you're kind of like protecting the mob token at the same time as you're taking out enemies from a clearing, and then you can score those victory points. Now let's talk about some of the scoring mechanics for the Lord of the Hundreds. It's a fairly aggressive faction, and the primary way that it gains victory points is through dominating a clearing, which means that there are no other enemy pieces present in that location, and that the Lord of the Hundreds does have pieces in that location. So as an example, I'm going to point to this, and this is going to be our starting location. So we're going to put out our Warlord, and in addition to that, 4 troops are going to come out onto the board as well. And then we also have our Stronghold. So the Stronghold is responsible for, in part, troop generation. So the one thing that you need to remember is that the rats can generate troops fairly quickly, and that even counts for the beginning of the game. So as we hit the second phase of the birdsong, it's called the recruit phase, and you're going to look at the prowess score on your horde, which starts at 1. And what that's going to do is add 1 warrior to the Warlord's clearing. So I'm going to put it literally in the clearing with the Warlord. And then you're going to place 1 warrior at all the strongholds that are on the map. So in this case, my Warlord and the stronghold is in the same location. So literally on turn 1, I have a massive amount of troops just in the starting location that I have. Next, what I want to do is focus on eliminating the enemies that are actually present. So that's going to key off of what's called my command point total, and that's going to occur in daylight. So based upon my command, which is going to start as a 1, because that's the default value, that means that I can take 1 action, either move battle or build. So if I'm looking at a basic starting location, I want to wipe out as many of the enemy troops as possible. Now, the big problem with the Lord of the Hundreds is that since I only have a 1 command at the beginning of the game, I can only make 1 attack against an enemy at the location. So I can wipe out the Corvids or I can wipe out the Cats, but I can't wipe out both because I just don't have enough command points. So in this case, I would easily defeat the Corvids and then I would lose 1 warrior as well. But I still can't score any victory points at this location until every single enemy piece has been removed. So maybe on the next turn, I wipe out the cat warrior from that location. And then I have basically this clearing is uncontested and the rats control it 100%. That's going to allow me to score points through oppression. So the rats are just dominating and controlling this clearing. Now, the way that the scoring works is kind of a tiered approach, and the most points that you can get for holding locations is going to be 4 points, and that's by holding 6 of the clearings. 6 of the clearings is exactly half of the map. There's only 12 clearings in each map of route, so in order for you as the Lord of the Hundreds to score maximum points, you're going to have to control 6 clearings. All right, so at the bottom of the card here, this is what I was talking about for scoring points. So if you control 1 to 2 clearings that are uncontested, no enemy pieces, you get 1 victory point. And then it goes from 3 to 4, gets 2, and then 5 is 3, and then 6 is 4. It's pretty difficult early on to hit, obviously, the +3 or the +4 points. But just remember to focus on generating troops at both your strongholds and in conjunction with your warlord and taking those locations. The best thing that you can do is be ultra aggressive at the start of the game and wipe out and annihilate the other players' engines as they're building them on the map. So constantly ruin their infrastructure and claim points from them. So not only are you going to claim points from holding the locations, but be critical of that they have tokens and buildings out on the map, and you can also score 1 victory point per each token that's removed. In addition to that, your mob tokens are also going to be removing their buildings and their tokens from the map, in which you're also scoring victory points. So this faction is based upon aggression, and then more aggression. Start out strong and start out super aggressive on the map and immediately start hitting your opponents. If you can disrupt their engines before they get them built, they can't counterattack you. They can't really do anything against you, and it's a fantastic way to take control of the game early on and simply dominate the game. Another comment that I'll make is literally on your opening hand. So with the advanced setup, you're going to draw 5 cards. You're going to flip those over, and then you can keep 3 of these cards, whatever 3 you feel like, for the start of the game. So be really strategic about where you're going to be moving. So as an example, the game started over here, and I wanted this clearing over here to build a stronghold. Well, I'm going to need to spend an orange card to build that stronghold over here. So be really strategic when you are setting up your opening hand and look for advantages on where you're going to spend those cards. And that could be either spending a card to build a stronghold, or you can spend the card to build your first mob token as well. I'll make kind of a final comment on strategy for the Lord of the Hundreds, and this comment and concept is kind of a battle line. And when you're trying to take over and hold 6 different clearings to maximize your victory point totals, what can happen is that you're going to spread yourself thin and you won't have a lot of warriors to be at your front lines. So the concept of a battle line is kind of like this. This location is in the corner and it's protected by these 3 clearings, and notice that I have a lot of warriors placed in these 3 clearings, so the chances for an enemy to slip through and attack this sort of vulnerable location is fairly unlikely. So if you keep your perimeter of your empire fairly strong and robust, it's hard for the enemy to break through those battle lines, and you can literally just hold this location with only 1 rat troop. And always be on the lookout for the buildup of, obviously Corvid tokens And then, you have the Woodland Alliance tokens too that can build up at locations, and that can kind of be a threat to you. Also realize too that in some of these locations you might have a mob token, so this is naturally going to negate the enemy's ability from wanting to do that. Another thing that can happen to you when you play the Lord of the Hundreds is obviously, you can have the wonderful lizard people start replacing your troops. So if you're playing against the lizards, you might try to just reinforce every location with a couple of your warriors to prevent them from, very quickly taking your territory by simply replacing your troops with their lizard warriors. But if you can kind of keep this idea in mind, it doesn't take long for you to amass 6 territories that you need for those 4 victory points. Here are some words of wisdom when playing the Lord of the Hundreds. You have to be in the right mindset when you start the game. And I know this sounds kind of harsh, but when you're playing the Lord of the Hundreds, you have to be aggressive. And that will often put you at odds with every other single player on the entire table. Now, when our play group started playing with this faction, it became very clear that, especially, I think it was our 3rd game, every single player at the table, other than myself, I was playing the Lord of the Hundreds, basically formed a coalition and said, you know what, we're tired of the rats and we're just going to wipe them out. So in that 5-player game, it was literally 4 of the factions against the Lord of the Hundreds. But at the point that they made the coalition, it was kind of halfway through the game. It was too late because the Lord of the Hundreds had literally sacked and destroyed all of their infrastructure, and they couldn't really respond to it, and their engines had been shattered at that point. But what was interesting in subsequent games of Root with the same play group, immediately when the game started, and this is games I think 5 and 6, they immediately, every other single player formed a coalition on turn 1 to said, you know what, we're going to fight the Lord of the Hundreds right out of the gate. So that's something that you should realize is the mental aspect when you're constantly attacking people. It kind of polarizes them all against you, so it's not uncommon for all the other players at the table to fight against you if you're playing the Lord of the Hundreds, which can be pretty daunting. The other thing is there's a psychological effect that when you're attacking players and they're getting upset and you're wrecking and destroying their engines, you might actually feel bad about it, and that will kind of have you hold back when you're fighting them. And that's the worst thing that you could do because the Lord of the Hundreds is about aggression. So if you're going to play the Lord of the Hundreds, be aggressive the entire time. And just keep telling the other players at the table, no, I have to attack you. This is the only way I can score victory points. And just keep saying that over and over again. Because it's easy for their frustration to derail your engine. So you kind of have to have a really aggressive mindset when you're playing this faction. The other thing I noticed is a lot of the players do not like playing this faction because it is so aggressive and they refuse to play it. So in our play group, after seeing how the Lord of the Hundreds works and wins, many of the players refuse to play it because they don't want to be that aggressive in the game and they don't want to be like fighting the other players. It's just too much for them. All right, so we're going to sum it up and say that the Lord of the Hundreds is a fantastic faction to play. It definitely feels different than the other factions that they've placed into the game. Kind of the one downside to it is that if you're not an aggressive player and you don't necessarily want to be in everybody's face and be the villain of the game, this probably isn't the faction that you want to play. Once we started playing a lot of this faction, it became extremely evident that it will be the target every time it comes out onto the board. If somebody with experience with the Lord of the Hundreds is playing a game, they might be more apt to attack you, and it's also easier for coalitions of the players to form in which all of the players are against you due to the aggressive nature of the Lord of the Hundreds. So kind of stay away from this faction if you like a more diplomatic role in the game. If you are going to play the Lord of the Hundreds, be aggressive the entire time, and just tell the other players, like, hey, this is the only way that I can score points. I kept having to reiterate that because they kind of saw me as a jerk when I was playing this faction, and once you start getting it, you have to be aggressive and just slaughter everything that you see to take over these locations and start scoring points. So I hope you have enjoyed this video, and it's given you a great basis in the strategy and the techniques that you need to employ when you play the Lord of the Hundreds. I want to thank you all for joining me today, and as always, have fun gaming.